trust in the British police has been rocked in recent months, with some left frustrated over how they've handled the public during the pandemic and, of course, the policing of women, attending that vigil for Sarah Everard on Clapham Common. In fact, earlier this morning, I said to Sir Ed Davey whether he stood by his call for the Commissioner, Met Police Commissioner Cressida Dick, to resign. And he said he stood by his words in the wake of that vigil.
Yeah. On the day the nation remembers the life of Stephen Lawrence, today is Stephen Lawrence Day, who was murdered in a racist attack nearly 30 years ago, we debate whether we can trust the British police. Joining us is journalist and author Ella Whelan, Leroy Logan, a former superintendent in the Met Police, and Dr Rakib Ehsan, an independent expert in British public attitudes. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us. Ella, come to you first. Do you sense there's been a shift in young people particularly? Is there a worry? Is there a concern? Is there more young people mistrusting the police now?
I think there has always been among certain sections of society a mistrust for the police, particularly among young black men, particularly among working class communities. There's a sense that the police doesn't really serve them. I mean, that's backed up by the fact that, you know, many young black men and women will be stopped and searched unnecessarily. Many people living in poorer communities will have crime happening in those communities, and there's no point calling the police because either they don't turn up, or if they turn up, they're no good. But there is, I think, the more interesting thing, because that's been happening for quite a long time, is that there's this shifting relationship with the police now, I think, among more middle-class activists and campaigners who have this double view of the police, which on the one hand, they like to castigate the police as institutionally racist, institutionally misogynistic, inherently evil and absolutely corrupt. And then in the same breath, call for the increase of police intervention into their private lives, whether that be in relation to women, the involvement of police in kind of protective measures, whether they be hate crime laws, whether they be asking for police to kind of watch us, look after us on the street, or whether it be intervention police into, for example, PCSOs in schools acting as role models, police being kind of playing the role of a big brother, a friendly big brother, rather than the role that they are, which is the arm wing of the state. And so it's incredibly confused at the moment. I think some campaigners today can't make up their mind whether they think the police are the absolute enemy, or whether actually we need more police intervention into our private lives.
Well,
and I think that...
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Leroy Logan, you're a former superintendent in the Metropolitan Police, one of London's top officers until you retired. Has been a very difficult year this year for the police. I mean, because as Ella Whelan says, you know, the role that they're expected to play seems to be constantly shifting, particularly with the pandemic restrictions and the way that they have had to enforce those, sometimes to their sort of the detriment in public opinion. If you look at the policing, for instance, of the Sarah Everard vigil on Clapham Common, but which, of course, they were exonerated over by the report on that. Then you had the murder of George Floyd by a police officer over in the States, and the Black Lives Matter resurgence here, calls to defund the police. If you're a serving police officer right now, Leroy Logan, what must you be thinking about what your role is?
Well, thank you for having me. There's a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta that says a policeman's lot is not a happy one. By definition, it's never going to be in smooth sailing. It's always going to have challenges. But I think police have been set up in a lot of ways by how the political will of central government wants the policing of COVID. And that's on top of 10 years of austerity, which has caused a disconnect between police and communities, in particular young black people, who the trust and confidence is the lowest it's been in 20 years. And now we've seen how other issues have been laid bare in terms of sexual offences, how they police that, and domestic violence, etc. So there is that disconnect which has been developed, and the leadership doesn't seem to really understand that disconnect. In fact, they're in a sense of denial. And so there seems to be this firefighting type policing, reacting from one event to another, not being sensitized to the public mood and how they want to see a police service not occupying force. And you see these this uprisings of various kinds of young people protesting, especially through the Black Lives Matter era. And I think also the narrative, that the narrative of the commissioner during this Black Lives Matter, when she says institutional racism doesn't exist, not helpful, and then she says, and this is Stephen Lawrence Day today, she says she's no longer going to investigate the Stephen Lawrence case. The timing couldn't be worse if you tried. So I think there's a real issue around the disconnect of policing per se and the commissioner not being sensitised to these issues, and a timing can be worse if you tried.
Yeah. Dr. Rakib Ehsan, let's bring you in here. I mean, we just saw images there from Bristol not so long ago of a police van on fire. I mean, the last time I remember seeing anything like this was, I remember my first day at school, 1985, was the day after the Handsworth riots, you know, and we remember seeing pictures on the television then. We haven't seen anything like that in years. Now, that wasn't necessarily young black people. That was a mixture of young people, actually, mainly white people, as it happened. What is going on that we're suddenly seeing this, not just mistrust for the police, but complete disdain, disrespect, disregard, to the extent that these people in Bristol put police, men and women's lives at risk? I mean, that's a serious problem, isn't it?
I think it is. We really need to work on boosting the relationship between local police forces and the communities they serve. And I do feel that in recent times we've seen serious cuts in terms of frontline policing, which has been hugely problematic. We want that effective neighbourhood model of policing across Britain, but particularly in urban, diverse areas. What I will say, though, we've talked about the Black Lives Matter demonstrations. I think we really need to adopt a more balanced approach when we're talking about the issue of policing. There was a recent survey by Hope Not Hate, which showed that the majority of ethnic minority people living in the UK felt that in terms of policing, in the matter of racism, is more down to a select number of racist individuals as opposed to the problem being institutional. And we have seen recent surveys which showed that there are ethnic minority communities who are more likely to have confidence in their local police when compared to the white British mainstream. So I'm not denying that there has to be improvements in terms of police-community relations, but I think we should guard against the potential vilification of police forces across the country.
OK. We have to leave it there.